it'll derail everything.
Right. All right. Welcome, guys, to this second structured presentation. This one with Ariella Rogge from Sanborn Western Camps. We would go around and do introductions, but Eric can't speak and Stephanie can't speak, and we can't really see her either. So, great to see you, Eric. Great to see you, Steph. And what's going to happen here is we're going to turn it over to Ariella and Heather, and they're going to introduce themselves and then speak for about 10 minutes about Sanborn and Sanborn's outcomes measurement. And then we're going to take about 20 minutes to Tommy. What's happening?
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Sorry I'm late.
Yeah. No, it's all right. And then we're going to spend about 20 minutes on Q&A, just asking questions, some of them for our benefit and some of them for their benefit. Then we'll jump off at 2 o'clock Eastern and send Ariella our feedback or our reactions to her presentation, and that'll be that. So without further ado, Ariella, take it away.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you could join today. Basically, just want to start out kind of giving an introduction to Sanborn. We are a 501c3 nonprofit under the umbrella of the Colorado Outdoor Education Center, and so we have two camps. We have a boys camp and a girls camp, so brother-sister camps, and we run 2-month-long programs in the summer, and then we also within those have 4 2-week sessions for our 1st through 3rd graders, or 4th graders, I guess. So for our little guys, our month-long program is for basically 3rd through sophomores, juniors in high school. We're trip-based, choice-focused, and our mission is to live together in the out-of-doors, building a sense of self, a sense of community, a sense of the earth, and a sense of wonder through fun and adventure. And really, we decided to kind of get into the whole research piece, partially because Deb, who just got on, hi Deb, partially because she and I got really excited about this new tool that the ACA had developed called the Youth Outcomes Battery. And so in 2012, we kind of looked at those, the different surveys that are offered, and I actually can pull that up on the screen because I can screen share now, and so I'm going to show you this. So this is the outcomes. So there's affinity for nature. Can everybody see this?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Matt? All right. Okay, it's okay. Basically, maybe I didn't hit the share button. Let me try this. All right, let me try this. Okay. So these are the different scales that are involved in the outcomes battery. So the affinity for nature, camp connectedness, family citizenship, friendship, independence, interest, exploration, perceived competence, problem-solving competence, responsibility, spiritual well-being, teamwork, and young camper. So what we did in 2012, 2013, 2014, we administered a series based on those, kind of like Matt was talking about last week, the 4 pillars. We administered them based on our mission. So, for example, we chose independence, responsibility, and perceived competence to represent our sense of self element of our mission. Next summer we will look at camp connectedness, friendship, and teamwork as our sense of community skills, and then we have sense of the earth, and then the rest kind of fall under sense of wonder. So that's how we are using the YOB. So we don't administer all 12 of them. Are there 12, right, Deb? 13.
Yeah.
We don't do them all at the same time. We just do a small amount every summer, with the idea that we are creating this baseline for ourselves to determine, are we achieving the mission. Obviously, as this has gone on over the last few years, our first couple of years, 12, 13, 14 wasn't too bad. We had some challenges in terms of administration. We we were trying to do, ACA had kind of two different models, and I don't remember that crazy. What's the crazy one called, Deb?
The detailed version.
The detailed version. But what kind of instrument is that?
Retrospective pretest.
Yeah, a retrospective pretest. That one was complicated, and the data entry was complicated for that too. So we had some help with some of the data from Deb helped connect us with a gal named Hannah Kelling from Kent State University, and that was really helpful. She did an analysis of our 2013 and 2014, or no, excuse me, our 2012 and 2013 data, and gave us some interesting results. But unfortunately, some of those, it wasn't a complete set of data. We missed a boys session, we screwed up the age for the detailed versus the basic. There's just a lot of hoo-ha. So this year, in 2015, we went to the basic for everybody. And so, again, we looked at responsibility, perceived competence, and independence as those sense of self measurements. And it's pretty neat to see some of the results. Now, backing up a little bit, it all goes back to the why. And it was one of those things that I love Deb, and I wanted to, support Deb and ACA, and I also knew that at some point we were going to need kind of this information. And it's so interesting because just yesterday, I was called on. One of our partners is the University of Academy in Kansas City, and we typically receive between 2 and 6 full scholarship campers from this inner city Kansas City school that has this big foundation, and what the foundation has committed to is sending kids to these camps. And so when the kids are in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, the foundation has committed to, if their grades are good enough and if they go through all the rigmarole of applying, they will send them to camp, either to Sanborn, Lincoln Lake Huber, or some other program. And just this week, we found out that kids who have been coming for the last couple of years aren't going to be able to come for a 3rd year, or if they came last year for their 1st year, aren't going to be able to come for a 2nd year, because they want all the kids, they want to be able to give more kids the experience, which is great. I totally hear that, and I totally see where they're coming from. And yet, I was able to submit this data in a letter yesterday to show that kids who come for multiple years, because of the way Heather entered the data and the way that it breaks down, that you actually see an increase in independence and responsibility and perceived competence over time. Every year, which is really neat. That we actually had this documentation to share.
Every year, even if they've been here before.
Right, even if they've been here before. So, so I'm going to just show you. Well, let me just show you that really fast. I don't know if I'm using it. I have 1 minute of my 10 minutes, but I'm just going to show you anyway. So years coming to camp. So you see, this is. Here you say more than 6 times, and then 1st time, 2nd time, 3rd time, 4th time, 5th time. So those are the years at camp, and these are our numbers of kids in that. And so you can see it's not a huge, but you see, independence, 3.96 1st time. 2nd time, 4.05. Again, we were just talking about statistical significance. Deb, you'd have to answer that because I'm not sure. But look at this is definitely a jump by the time you hit that 4th summer. And then there's, it falls off for certain reasons. So it's an interesting, then you start asking why. And here, Matt, here's this little graph that we like. So this is what the ACA's new online system will generate for you when you enter the data online. It actually automatically generates these cool charts and things. So you can see, again, more than 6 times here, but then 1st time, 2nd time, 3rd time. So you can see that little bit of an increase. And I'm not sure why this says by gender because it doesn't need to. And then again, nominal but increasing, and then responsibility is increasing too. So it's pretty, we're excited about, I was thrilled that yesterday I actually got to use this prior to this conversation in a way that actually was meaningful and helpful. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then finish up with just the fact that, we love the YOB, but we also recognize it's not a standalone instrument. We still do parent evaluations. We have these big conversations with campers. One of the senior staff members, myself, Elizabeth, Mike, Matthew, somebody goes down and talks to all the kids before they leave camp and just say, okay, what was, and that's some programmatic stuff, like what worked. We also are able to talk about staff without the staff being in there to get some, pretty candid feedback from the kids. And it also creates that opportunity for the kids to know that if there's something that they didn't say because of the group scenario or whatever, they had an opportunity to come and talk to us because we are genuinely interested in their opinions, because we want to continue to improve camp and to give other kids, as good or a better experience than they had while they were there. So we do that, and then we also are obviously very responsive to all feedback. Next year we'll look at those, sense of community. We'll look at the sense of community piece of the mission, and then Heather is also doing something really neat because she is an anthropologist. She's kind of a big deal, and so she is going to look at our older campers. And you want to just kind of explain what you're going to start doing?
Sure. I think what this data showed, because they were pretty good scores on the independence, perceived competence, and responsibility with all the kids at both camps, and no matter how long they had been there. So what I thought was interesting with that data is that we know that something's working. So scores on these measures are going up. And so as an anthropologist, what I like to do is look behind now that data and say, if it's working, how is it working and why is it working? Like, how is this camp creating this culture? And how are the kids taking up this culture? So why are we getting the results that we're getting? And I'm particularly looking at the older kids because there's a lot of good data in there in terms of also the older kids have to apply to be junior counselors. And so they've got these applications where they write about their experience at camp and then why they want to be counselors to other kids. So there's data in there about that can reveal something about camp culture. And the large question, which I noticed from talking to camp people and being at the ACA conferences, is that people talk about the camp experience a lot. And so I'd love to get sort of in there and find out what is the camp experience that is producing these outcomes that the quantitative measures have shown.
So that's basically what we're doing and where we're going. And what I think the thing that I find most exciting about the whole process is all of a sudden you see the whys. You look at some of those data, and like if you look back at the years coming to camp, we actually saw a drop off in the junior counselor level in responsibility. So here is a group of kids who are now actually responsible for other campers and have a ton more responsibility as such, but their perception of their increase of responsibility actually drops from the 9th grade year to the 10th grade year, which makes us say, why? What's going on? Are they themselves feeling less responsible because they're messing around, or avoiding tasks because they're junior counselors and they get more freedom? Who knows? But it's an opportunity for us to have those conversations in concert with what Heather's doing, and then potentially re-administer responsibility to that group next year and find out if what we did made a difference. I'm done, Matt.
All right, so Steph and Eric, you guys are going to have to type in the chat. There's I'm having feedback. So is there, Deb, is there any chance you have? Oh, there, it just went away. All right, so Steph and Eric, you guys will have to type your stuff into the chat, but Tommy and Deb, you guys can have at it. Deb has a comment. All right.
Unmute yourself, Tommy.
I was just trying to prevent the take over the screen thing. So.
It happens sometimes.
Thank you for the consideration. So I have a question. So then, to Heather's point, you have these scores. How do you know? You mentioned culture, and I think culture is something that is hard to visualize, but I totally agree that this is a big piece of moving the dial. But specifically, do you guys have program like realizations about program things that you do? You mentioned a couple in your blurb.
What do you mean by?
So like
Yeah.
what something that is you're making a difference in responsibility or something like that. Are you trying to figure out what it is that you do that does move the dial in that specifically, or are you still at a loss for this?
Well, I think what we need to do is talk to the campers and find out what they think the term responsibility means. And when we say that the scores look like they dropped off a little bit, but that's still something we need to find out from Deb, hopefully, or somehow, if that drop off was actually statistically significant or may have been due to chance. But let's just say there is something going on there, then we would go back and talk to the campers, because there could be a couple of explanations. Like, as junior counselors, there's sort of a tradition that they'll pull pranks. As junior counselors are also in an age where some research on risk and resiliency for kids will say it's actually healthy for kids to take risks in a safe environment. So we might look into things like that. One thing I wanted to say about culture, just to make it seem a little more tangible, is something one of the girls said. I did like focus group interviews with these junior counselors at the end of every session, each session, and one said that it was very funny to her during the school year. If she ever gets together with her friends from camp, she said, I feel like I can revert back to my camp personality, which is sort of interesting. And another thing that girls talked a lot about, I asked them, because there's this phrase where people say the real world versus the camp world. So I'll say, so what does that mean? What's the difference? And like one thing, which is just a very simple, tangible thing, is that girls don't really, except for the dances, wear makeup at camp. They don't dress up at camp. That's different than what it's like for them in high school. So there's a sense that they are more genuine. And so those are just little pieces of saying that there's something different about the culture at camp than the real world for them.
Yeah, and I think the other piece around that is just in terms of programmatic changes is just being able to say, okay, let's just look at this one thing. You know, I don't think you get to use this data and be like, oh, we're changing everything about our program, because again, it's a standalone thing. You know, it's an increase measurement. It's a self-reported increase measurement, and so as long as you're seeing increase, that's great. But you aren't looking for all fives, I don't think, on this sort of thing. You just want to make sure that kids are truly experiencing positive increases while they're at camp in these outcomes, and they're also still having a heck of a good time because it's camp.
Right.
You could sit here, and Matt and I've talked about this. We could do all sorts of, make them take surveys and tests the whole time they're here, but that's dumb because that's not what camp is about. So it's really an opportunity, to determine that we are delivering the product we think we're delivering, as well as, making sure that we are continuing to improve. And yes, we ask questions based on what we see. How can we improve? Hannah Kelling gave us some information last year that it looked like between first and second session, some of our numbers had dropped off. Again, was it statistically significant? I don't know, but there was definitely a difference in some of our numbers between the two sessions. And
that was 2 years ago, not last year.
No,
that
not
didn't
last year.
happen last year.
But for the programmatically, what we did last year is during staff training and then in between sessions, we said, this is what data showed last year, that you guys, didn't deliver the same sort of enthusiastic, present type of program that for for first session or second session that you did for first session. So what are you going to do about changing that? So it was a conversation with the staff, and we didn't see that number. We didn't see that this year. Granted, we were looking at different outcomes, but still, it was interesting because this year, across gender, across camps, across sessions, all of our numbers were very, very similar.
Right, right. And I think the idea, too, is that if you get good numbers, you're going to want to find out what's happening and continue those things to happen, like continue the staff training the way that you're doing the staff trainings. Like, so if you're getting good numbers, you get a baseline for what's working, and you keep training your staff in that manner. If you are getting some scores where things aren't working, you can either sort of think it through in your own individual camps about how you might want to change things, or you can start to look at other camps' data and say, well, what are they doing to get these kinds of outcomes?
Mm-hmm.
There's two questions here. Heather's a question about groups. She's curious about how you've done that. And then Deb, Eric has a question around statistical significance. So Deb, maybe you can talk about statistical significance, and then Heather, you could talk about the focus groups and how you've done those.
Yeah, I think the statistical significance piece of that, honestly, most of our camp people don't really care too much about statistical significance. What's more important is sort of understanding what they're seeing in the general information back. Like, are they going up? Are they going down? Are they staying the same? Whatever. So we've never really, all the norms are there. With those over to statistical significance, because statistical significance is influenced by numbers, so it'd be fairly complicated. But I am talking with Jim Sibthorpe, who's helped develop all these things, and Jim's a real method stats guy, and we're going to see if there's something that will help give some guidance around what you're seeing, and I think there's the outcomes research is kind of interesting, because I know Mark Rourke did a session a couple years ago at the research symposium where he tracked sort of this idea of what does it look like over time. And he saw Heather, he saw the exact same kind of thing that you were seeing, where the first year there was significant increase, and then the second year when they went back to that same camp, it still increased. The third year it still increased. At the fourth and fifth year it started plateauing off. And he raised the issue at that point were the camps, because he kind of was seeing it across the board. He goes, was the camp really doing enough to keep those kids that have been back a number of years truly engaged around those kinds of outcomes? So I think he didn't have an answer, but I think it's something that's really interesting to think about. And, I don't get too hung up on statistical significance, to tell you the truth, because I think the data, the way I would like for people to think about data is data gives you a perspective. And statistical significance, if it's changing or not, that might matter at some level, but what's most important is that you, the camp person, has got information now, and you're seeing some things over time, or you're seeing trends, and either they're going up or down. Yeah, some of that could be by pure chance, but even if it was, how much difference would that really make? That's kind of like the usability of data versus the actual sort of academic use of data. I think as a director or a camp person, when you get the data, like Ariella, you gave a perfect example. Did it really matter whether that was statistically significant or not? Well, I don't know. Some people might get into that. But you had data now that you could give to that school and say, hey, look, this is making an impact. And even if it's just maintaining and going up a little bit year by year, hey, we're doing something here that looks pretty good, because overall these kids were saying they increased. They felt like within their reality they were increasing. So, long story on statistical significance, but that's kind of the way I look at it with this kind of data.
Heather, you want to talk about focus groups, and then we'll get to Eric's second question.
Sure. The way that I would do a focus group is actually just very open-ended. You kind of sit with the campers and explain what you're doing in a very transparent way, that you're trying to just learn more about their experience at camp, and then say, how was your summer? What did you learn? You know, and sort of the basic questions that you're interested in. Just ask very, very, very open-ended questions and try to make it very comfortable and take notes and see what emerges. And that's the way that sort of qualitative, grounded research works, is that you really just leave it open and let what emerges from the people you're talking to emerge, and then note the patterns.
Tommy, do you have a question? I'm interested.
No, I'm just absorbing stuff here.
So then, Eric, you were talking about randomized control trials. I think this is such a good question, and this is something that we've been talking about. I've been wondering a lot about, because it's in a way, without randomized control trials, it's hard to be taken seriously outside of camp for people who don't have any interest in camp or are not from camp. But you're absolutely right. It is really hard. I think Deb said that they're in the ACA. They've been having conversations about longitudinal studies. Deb, do you want to repeat a little bit of what you said last week about the possibility of something like this?
Yeah, we're
I lost Deb.
Yeah, we lost Deb. All right, so Eric, you're talking about a 4 versus a 4.1. We don't use the RO. We don't use the youth outcomes battery, but I think what a 4 or 4.1 means is whether they've been making progress, right? It's how much progress you've made, Ariella.
I'm sorry, would you say that one more time? I was reading the chat.
The 4 or 4.1 is how much progress has been made, right? It's not like a static, you are a 4 or you are a 4.1.
Right. And I think that's the piece, is that it's a 1 through 5 scale, and so they basically, and I don't remember exactly what it's like, increased, did not increase, right.
Increased some,
or increased a little. I think increased a little is 2. 3 is increased some, 4 is increased some, I'm sure, and then increased a lot, I think was 5.
Lot, I'm sure.
A lot, I'm sure. It's kind of there's a lot of I'm sures in there. They are sure that it increased. So there is a, when you're looking at that number, you're looking at a large percentage of our population said, if it's in a 4 category, it increased some, I'm sure.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So
yes.
They all are saying it did increase, basically.
I guess what Eric is sort of maybe getting at, I don't know, but is a 4, I mean, has Deb given you any idea about what other scores are? Like maybe all the other camps are.
Yes,
sure. Yeah, and so if you and I think I can pull it up. I'm going to do this screen share thing because I think that's fun to force people to look at my computer. So I think the norms are actually in here. Yeah. So down here you can actually see the different. You can download the norms here, and then you can look at what your results are in those areas. So all campers, normative, so residential campers over. Okay, so let's look at responsibility. So this is where we would fall. So this 70th percentile of camps. So do we have room to increase? Absolutely. And these are down here are numbers that I don't know very much about, but and then you can look at it, and then you can look at the gender pieces, and so yeah, you can definitely pull it up against the norms,
okay.
Which I think is helpful to see where you are compared with other camps. We're at 12:01.
Deb, you can go here in a minute. It's 2 o'clock, so I want to release anybody who wants to go. I just want to remind you before you go that if you could please send Ariella any sort of reactions you're having. This is in part just the process part of it, which is to make these connections across the cohort, and then you can later build on them if it comes to that. Ariella, do you have to jet, or can you stick around for a couple minutes?
We could stick around for a couple minutes. Yep.
Okay, great. So whenever you have to bail out, Steph, Eric, Tommy, Deb, that's fine. Otherwise, Deb, you were in the middle of saying something before we lost you before. And it looks like she's
Deb's audio is not working, she said.
Okay.
Okay.
Tommy, what do you any questions?
No, yeah, I'm still just starting to absorb this stuff, and I have a million different questions, but I'll probably just wait. One of the things that came up about the years 4 and 5 were less effective, or less the amount of impact went down, leading to what Eric said about control groups. It'd be interesting to measure the people who came for 3 years and then stopped coming. To see what they reported, so you could actually control against sort of that longitudinal piece there, where, well, the campers who flattened out in years 4 and 5 were much better compared to the cohort that did not come to camp in years 4 and 5, just in terms of finding major differences.
Right, and that's what I just stated to school in that letter, which was, obviously this doesn't tell me what's happening to the kids once they, aren't involved in this camp experience, and I can say that the kids who are will continue to increase. So it's up to you to take that risk, people.
They're still increasing, even if the scores are plateauing out in terms of the amount they're increasing. They're still increasing.
Yeah.
Right. It's just yeah.
Because the questions are, did you experience an increase in all of these things?
Mm-hmm.
And their answers are, yes, I experienced an increase. So they're still increasing. And I wanted to say another thing. I think this is what Deb was about to talk about. I think I could be wrong, but is the possibility that these kinds of tests can be administered in schools, and that can serve as a control group to compare with camp.
Yeah, and
Was that it?
Well, she's actually I can. Is she still trying to get back on, Matt?
She's still trying, yeah.
Basically, she is. ACA's next big focus is, the board met in October or whatever, and Tom basically said, ACA really, we want to focus on research, and so as a national organization, and so one of the things that they're going to be. They are currently actively looking for partners, and Deb can explain this in more detail, but basically to create a true longitudinal study that, in some ways, we have an opportunity to help sort of shape, because we can say we really want that comparative piece, like Eric was talking about. We really want, the school component, or as Tommy just said, what happens to the lapsed user group, and what sort of longitudinal study can the ACA design, and what sort of information can we get out of it? And that's I think what Deb was. She's obviously going to be able to talk about it in much more detail, but that's really one of the big. Okay, here it is. She's written it down. ACA wants to start a study of the same kids over time. Maybe 5-year focus, hasn't been decided. Things like outcomes, and more importantly, the critical incidences that are the catalyst for change is extremely important. So there it is.
What else? Anything else?
Yeah.
I just want to say, too, I just ran into somebody like 2 days ago who had heard of this camp and said, oh, I know someone who said they went to that camp and it changed their life, which I'm sure is something that we've all heard all the time, like it changes your life. So I think there also might be an opportunity for all the camps to contact alumni and pose some questions to alumni. How do you think, in terms of getting that longitudinal data, to get something sort of even just suggestive? That's like, how did camp? How do you think that camp affected your life? And then look for patterns again. And some of those things might be suggestive in terms of what to look for if the ACA starts to now fresh follow campers longitudinally. Like look for things that are happening with them that might have come up in alumni interviews.
Interesting.
Let's say, I mean, one of the things I'm interested in is this, the whole idea of best practices. And I guess, just hypothetically, let's say that the folks at ACA are looking over all of the data from the Youth Outcomes Battery over for the year, and there's something around interest in exploration or whatever. And so they've got those deciles, and there's some camp called Sanborn that is like hitting 5s on the interest in exploration or whatever the one I just said. Aren't we then curious about like what's going on at that camp? I want to know what's going on at that camp. And so everyone sort of like descends on the camp and is like, what are you guys doing? And they may not even know what they're doing. So Heather, you're suggesting that then the kids in a focus group would tell you that's how you'd figure out the answer to the question of like who the sort of who's really moving the dial with these outcomes?
I think that's definitely one way. The other way is your more traditional anthropological kind of study, which is called ethnography, which is participant observation. So that is a very intensive, but you can recruit. I mean, we have found you can recruit some of these counselors who are looking for research experience, right, in this area to do this participant observation. And what that really means is you are just watching the process that the campers go through from the beginning to the end of camp. And again, looking for major patterns of what's happening. So if you're trying to find out why is that camp getting 5s in interest in exploration, you're really just going to put somebody like in the camp setting, and you're going to document it, kind of like sort of like a journalist documentary kind of eye. You're just really going to watch it and write it down. And then also, yes, you ask the campers what the experience has been like for them.
Deb writes about the control trial thing, which is totally true. That it's hard to control because you can't just go out and get any people. You got to go kids who want to go to camp. Otherwise, you're selecting families that are interested in camp, and so aren't you self-selecting there? Which is why charter schools, for example, are excellent at the randomized control trial because they run it all by lottery, or many of them run by lottery, and so therefore everybody applies. There's 500 applicants and 250 get in, and you track the 250 that get in, and you track the 250 that didn't, and those families are on average all in the same situation. So it is tough. But Eric, I'm right there with you about the control, in large part because I want it to be taken seriously outside the industry, and that's sort of the gold standard.
It's interesting. Sorry. The comment that Ariella made about the kids that the school wasn't going to let come back anymore, and I got cut off a little bit at the end of that, but there's an example of kids who want to go to camp who aren't going to camp. So, if there's kids who are getting not accepted to, applications, whether it's financially or not, yep. There's some campers out there that don't get to go to camp, or it's your waiting list kids. Right. Like if you have 30 people on a waiting list, great. There's 30 people that want to go to camp, they can't go to camp. Measure them in comparison to their experience not at camp or something along those lines.
Eric, that's a great question. I mean, that's a great point. I never thought about that, Tommy. I mean, I know you guys have a ton of kids. I wonder if there's a waiting list.
Yes, you
do. we're building. We don't wait lists.
Oh, no, sorry. I was talking to Eric actually.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you have a ton of kids or not. But
we're coming along.
Champions has a ton of kids, and I didn't know if you guys have to start a waiting list for your sessions. That's something that I never thought of, but that's a great idea. I think I've got all my questions. I think I'm good. Anybody else? All right. So
I thought that maybe you could ask parents about their siblings of campers who didn't go to camp. You've got some control that they're from the same family, but that's still kind of dicey. So.
It is, but I mean, I think that I love you're just trying to get toward a thing. The gold standard, obviously, is what happens in chemistry or whatever, and this is, social science, so it's not going to be perfect. But what you're talking about is better than not having one at all. Even it's just about people reading it in a journal and how much they can pick it apart, right? So, I love the idea, and I think that if the ACA is going to try it. I mean, you've got 3 good ideas right here. You've got scholarship kids who want to go but can't. You got waiting list kids who want to go but can't, and you got siblings of families who are probably in the same situation as their brothers and sisters but aren't going to camp. I think those are all great ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, not to get all meta, but this is exactly why I'm so excited about these things, is because I think even though everybody's not on the call, there's going to be a dialogue and a sort of ongoing raise the bar conversation that is happening, and each of us are going to contribute to it in our own little way. At any rate, I think we're going to close it up here. I just realized that you guys may not have Ariella's email address, so I'll email that out. But please email your reactions. I mean, Eric, this is great stuff. I love the way you're thinking about it. And then that's it. Any questions before we let go? Ariella and Heather, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And,
thank you.
Yeah, if I don't talk to you guys, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yeah. Happy holidays to all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy. Thanks, Eric. Bye, Steph.
So much.